Hello and welcome back to Supposedly Fun. My name is Greg and I am here today to do a Friday Reads video where I wrap up the week in reading and any other bookish news. I'm going to warn you up front, I have been grumpy for the last couple of days, but I've been productively grumpy because I managed to finish 4 different books this week. We'll be getting to that a little later on when I do the Friday Reads portion of this video. I was actually planning to film outside in the backyard again, like I did for my video about what is the Great American Novel, which I will link down below if you have not watched it yet. A lot of people really enjoyed the background, but the person who lives behind me is just radiating divorced dad energy, even though he's not divorced, having a Paul Simon dance party on his patio, but there's no dancing. So anyway, it just wasn't gonna work to film outside right now. So I came back in here. I think part of the general grumpy vibe is that I haven't really vibed with any of the movies that I've been watching or books that I've been reading. Again, we'll get to the books, but also Joel has been traveling this week for the first time in a while. He stopped traveling when Guinness started getting sick and now he has to be back on the road. So that, you just miss him, and still missing Guinness. So it's been just me and Jamie, and that part has been fine, but you just miss the other 2 people that you would like to be here. So just kind of general cranky vibes right now. I'm a human being. I have good days and bad days. So I'm going to try to be fun grumpy as we get through this Friday Reads video. I haven't read Band Called Ova, but is he fun grumpy? I'd say fun grumpy could be just frumpy, but that's hopefully not the case. But since Jamie has been recovering from her surgery, she had mammary tumors removed. And actually there was good news there. It feels like we were due for some good news, and there was good news there. We got the pathology back and they were both benign. Thank goodness. And they think they got all of it. So that was nice. Good to have some good news. But while she's recovering, she has stitches and she can't jump up or down off of things. Actually, now that I think about it, you can see there's a basket on that and the cushions are on the floor because we're trying to block her from jumping on anything. Basically, we've been living downstairs and I have to come up here to make myself dinner and things like that. So I bring her upstairs with me and you have to keep her from jumping. There are so many things up here that she can jump on that it just made more sense to go downstairs where there are significantly less. We have access to the backyard and it's just easier. The downside is I haven't slept in my bed in about a week and a half. And I didn't think it was bothering me, but I realized I'm just really tired and I haven't been sleeping. And I think that's part of why, we got an air mattress out. And the air mattress is low to the ground enough that she can basically just step onto it. And then from there, because we pressed it into the couch, she can just step from the air mattress onto the couch and it's fine. There's no jumping involved in it. It's been much better for that, but it feels like transitional living or like camping, and that does get old after a while. So that probably hasn't helped the grumpiness at all. I think really mostly it's just lack of sleep. Due to that, the air mattress wasn't doing it for me, so I've been sleeping on the couch, and I'm ready to get back in my own bed. I'm 40 now. I can't be messing around with my sleeping arrangements that much. It's just not pretty when that happens. Anyway, there was a lot of great feedback on that video about the Great American Novel. I am glad people have been enjoying it because I had a fun time doing it. It's something I'm going to be thinking about a lot as I continue working my way through my Pulitzer Prize project. And again, if you haven't watched that video, I'll put a link to it down below. But there have been a lot of really great suggestions for books, some that I haven't read, some that I haven't even heard of, and some that I didn't include for various reasons. I've really enjoyed going through the comments and seeing what people think of when they think of the Great American Novel and other books that they recommend and what they see as the sort of ideal. Seems a lot of us agree that you can't just have one Great American Novel. So I'm looking forward to continuing the conversation as I discover more Great American novels. And Joel and I did our video of the best books of the year so far. We did that together. I'll put a link to that down below as well. It was fun doing that with Joel, and I'm glad you all like to see him. I'm going to try to get him back a couple of times. He is going to be traveling more now that things are settled down a little bit. But I think at least I might try, if he's around, to do my monthly reading wrap-ups with him, because he reads a lot, especially while he's been traveling. So maybe, no promises, but I'm going to try that and we'll see how it goes. I think it's also probably worth mentioning that we watched Heartstopper. We finished it before Joel had to travel for the week, and it's a really adorable show. And it did make me want to go back to the graphic novel series. I've only read the first volume, and I kind of got attitude about it at the time, because as much as I liked the first volume, you kind of have to immediately go into the second one, and there are like 4 or 5 volumes. So I got my cranky old man energy out and was like, I don't want to read 4 volumes of this back to back to back. You know, it's gonna wait. And now, a year, 2 years later, I haven't read any of the other volumes. So it did revive my interest in that. There's also a financial consideration, because it's like, they're like $17 each, but somebody pointed out that they are online, and then somebody just recently reminded me that they are all online. So I think I'm going to try to do them that way, because for some reason my library has none of the Heartstopper books. Get it together, Missoula Public Library. Get it together. So the show was really cute. Really enjoyed it a lot. And one of the things I really liked about it is that it's a sort of complicated romance. It's not like the people get together and everything's fine, but it doesn't feel like the type of complications that people usually go for. Like, I always hate it in TV shows when you have a happy couple who's together, and like the go-to complication is either cheating or the fear of cheating. And that is so tiresome. So these felt organic, not cliched, and drawn from the real world, and I enjoyed that. I'm looking forward to season 2. Olivia Colman has a very small part in the show, but she was my favorite. I didn't realize she was in the show when we started watching, so when she showed up for the first time, I was like, oh my God, it's Olivia Colman. It's probably the gayest thing I've done in a while. Maybe not, I don't know. But I don't think I could be the judge for that. But it's a really cute show, and I'd recommend it. It is on Netflix. So that is like the best thing that I watched this week. Let's get into the actual Friday Reads portion of this video, because again, I finished 4 books and only one of them was really a success. And I'm not gonna spend a lot of time talking about that one, because it's The Secret Life of Albert Entwistle by Matt Cain. And the reason I'm not gonna spend a lot of time talking about this is that Joel had finished it when we did our last Friday Reads, which was a June reading wrap up, and I was almost done with it. So we talked a lot about it there, and then it factored into both of our lists for the best books of 2022 so far. And again, I'll put a link to that down below. So I feel like I've talked about this a lot and raved about it a lot. I don't want to spend a lot more time doing that, but I will reiterate, in case you didn't see either of those videos, that this was really a case of the right book coming along at the right time. It was a lot of what I needed emotionally as I worked through my own grieving process for losing Guinness. And again, thank you for all of your support as we have worked through that process. But also, it's just a really great queer story about someone who grew up in a time when homosexuality was criminalized and suppressed that part of himself to the point where he wasn't living a life at all and didn't have any people in his life. So it's about him opening up and learning to be vulnerable, which is a great lesson for a lot of people. And I just really loved it. I think it's an adorable book, and not just an adorable book, but it's a very meaningful book. So I like it. I would recommend it. Your mileage may vary, but it was definitely the book that I needed at this point in time, and I'm always going to be grateful for that. So that was the first book, and that was the most successful thing that I finished. After that, I started thinking about what I wanted to do next, and I decided to check out eGalleys that I have access to, and realized that there was one that was for a book that published this week, and another one that I was about to lose access to. So I decided to do both of those, try to finish them pretty quickly. And I did pull that off. The first one is Now Is Not the Time to Panic by Kevin Wilson. This is a book that is going to be published on November 8th of this year. He wrote a book called Nothing to See Here, which I have a copy of, but I'm thinking about whether or not I'm gonna unhaul it. feedback from Instagram when I posted about this was that I should still give Nothing to See Here a chance. But you could probably tell, since I'm wondering about this, I did not like this book, ultimately. The first quarter of the book, or maybe third of the book, is really, I wouldn't say really good, but it's setting up a better novel than I think we end up getting. The opening of the book, well, the opening is actually Frankie Budge as an adult with her daughter as she gets a phone call from a reporter who wants to ask her about the Coalfield Panic. Frankie is pretty put off by this phone call, especially when the reporter speaks this sort of nonsense phrase to Frankie that clearly means something to her, and says, "I know you're the person who wrote that." And Frankie hangs up, and then it immediately flashes back. And when she flashes back is the part that I liked, because, well, the whole book is a flashback, but the beginning of that flashback is the part that I liked, I should say. Because it's about Frankie as a child. She is lonely. She is at that awkward phase where she's still childish, but on the cusp of heading toward young adulthood and figuring out what she wants to do and who she wants to be. And I think one of the things that's really interesting about it is that Kevin Wilson is sort of looking at this as a critical phase, not just in deciding what you're going to do with your life, but also in deciding the kind of person you are going to be. And I thought that was interesting. So Frankie is lonely. She has these three brothers who are triplets and who are just rough and a little bit brutal. And they're carousing about, but she is staring down the barrel of a really lonely summer. She meets a boy named Zeke, who is also a little bit awkward, and they form a quick friendship that turns into a sort of quasi-romance as they just sort of stumble into each other and try to figure out romance and like what kissing is or what making out is. So it's not very romantic. It's more like kids who don't know what they're doing. And that felt a little bit honest and raw and real as well. So there's a lot that happens in that section that is a little bit poignant and well observed, I thought. But things start to go downhill, or at least they did for me, really quickly when Frankie and Zeke decide they want to do something big with their summer. They don't know what to do. So Zeke suggests that they make art because Zeke is an artist. So they come up with the idea of creating a poster, and that's where the real world intrudes on the book. So Zeke hands Frankie a pen, just tells her, like, write something that sounds like it could mean nothing, but also could mean everything. Just write something. And she writes this phrase that is actually from Kevin Wilson's own life. In the foreword to the book, he explains that a friend of his when he was young wrote that phrase, and it has kind of haunted him through his life. It's even informed the way he has worked as a writer. It wasn't clear from the foreword if he has actually used the phrase in his previous books, but he has certainly at least considered using it in his previous books, and then maybe took it out. And so basically he built this entire novel around wanting to use this phrase in a book. I took a picture of the phrase, which is on my phone, which is what I'm filming on right now. And I am not going to stop filming, so I have to edit that whole thing out to get it. Maybe I can find it online. This is where I get grumpy this week. Hold on. Okay, thank goodness for HarperCollins, because they have it on their website. The phrase is, "The Edge is a shanty town filled with gold seekers. We are fugitives, and the law is skinny with hunger for us." So that's the phrase from Kevin Wilson's life. That's what Frankie writes on the page. So Zeke makes artwork around that, and they just happen to have like boatloads of printer paper. So they make hundreds of copies of this poster. Like, where is this paper coming from? Where is the toner coming from? They're kids with no money. Anyway, it's like this magical printer that just keeps churning out posters, but maybe that's me being grumpy again. Anyway, they put the posters up all over the town, and people start getting interested. They don't know what it is. There's a lot of speculation, like, is this a punk band thing? Some people start worrying that it's a satanic thing. nobody knows what it is, what it means. And Zeke and Frankie get so obsessed with the reaction that they keep putting these posters up. And then it starts to spin out of control because other people start putting up posters. But every time, it's like a game of telephone. The more people do it, the more warped it gets. Like, it starts losing its quality, but then there are also people who are drawing their own versions of it. And then somebody dies because they were trying to hang the poster in a reckless place, and then people claim that they were kidnapped by satanic worshipers because they were out doing drugs and didn't want their parents to figure out that they were doing drugs, so they lie and said that they were kidnapped by the fugitives from the line. And it just starts spinning out of control, and Frankie and Zeke start having very different reactions to the way it spins out of control, and it just feels really contrived. And it feels like reading a writing exercise. Like, one of those situations where somebody gives you a writing prompt and says, like, write a story that involves an orange. And you have to then incorporate an orange into your story. It feels like he took this phrase that clearly means something to him and built an entire novel around it. And while the beginning has like a little bit of promise, everything starts to fall apart when it really becomes about the phrase. Because ultimately, I don't think the phrase is anywhere near as compelling as he does. I don't think the way everything just feels ham-handed at a certain point, because he's trying to make the phrase more important than it is. Like, even it starts flashing forward to Frankie in the future again, and you find out that the phrase is now like a punk thing. Bands have named themselves after the phrase. Urban Outfitters sells t-shirts that have the poster on it, and all kinds of things like that. Like, he has really created a world where this phrase suddenly becomes like a pop cultural touchstone in the world. And it just felt really clumsy, and I didn't like it. So, not for me. I've heard really good things about Nothing to See Here. So if you are a fan of that book, maybe you'd like this as well. Again, it comes out on November 8th. I don't want to denigrate it too much. I think there's possibility for people to like it, but I'd say maybe check out Nothing to See Here instead, because it seems like a lot of people like that one, and I just did not enjoy this book very much. Then I pivoted to Life Ceremony, which is short stories by Sayaka Murata, translated by Ginny, Tapley, Takemori. I really liked Convenience Store Woman when I listened to that on audio a while back, and that is a sort of quirky story about someone who doesn't fit in with society, trying to find a way to get by in the world. Like, basically, she got a job in a convenience store right out of high school, and she's been doing that job for a really long time. And people start thinking, it's like, well, when are you going to start living your life? When are you going to get serious about things? But she likes the convenience store. So it's a really cute book about social expectations and what happens when you don't meet them. So I was looking forward to reading another book by Sayaka Murata. I never got around to Earthlings. So I was really looking forward to this one, and I did not like it. Again, just did not like it. All of the stories feel like they're just kind of poking you like, hey, aren't social mores weird? And it's like, yeah, they are. Okay, I get it. But every story just tries to take a different one. And they can be a little compelling. Like, the first story has interesting points to make, because in it, the protagonist has gone to meet her friends, and she's wearing a sweater made of human hair. And they're talking about rings made of bone or human teeth and things like that. And so basically, humans have become clothing when they die in this story. And the protagonist is engaged to a man who doesn't like that. So the tension in the story is that, and in all of the stories, is that Sayaka Murata is playing with things that are taboo and sort of questioning, like, but isn't that weird? And by like the second or third story, you're like, I really get the point. Or maybe me being grumpy again was like, I really get the point. And I wasn't appreciating them. They felt a little bit too on the nose, because we certainly use animal hide and, animal products and things like that a lot. And we've created a dividing line between animals and us that does feel kind of arbitrary. Like, yes, that's interesting. But then she just keeps going into like food and, you know, maybe some people eat bugs and things like that. And then like marriage, it just keeps going. So I admit I skimmed the last half of this pretty hard. Didn't enjoy it. I think there's definitely room for somebody else to enjoy it, maybe if they're in a better mood than I've been this week. But I really wanted to put it down pretty much every time I finished a story, which is why I skimmed through it. So I'm going to be a lot more hesitant to try another Sayaka Murata book in the future. But if you've read this, I'd really like to hear what you think about it, because part of me is wondering if it's grumpiness on my part that really made me dislike it so much. And then the final book that I read this week was Loveless by Alice Oseman. This is what I had been listening to on audio. I actually just finished it this morning, and in a fit of grumpiness. So my problem with this book is that I feel like it's way longer than it needs to be. The audio is something like 9 or 10 hours, and I feel like you could easily shave at least 2 hours off of that. Maybe I'm grumpy. Like, it's a cute story, but I feel like Alice Oseman wrote the Heartstopper graphic novel series. She actually wrote the TV adaptation of Heartstopper as well. She's very good with episodic things where a story continues for a while, and I feel like when she's writing a novel, she's still thinking in that mode. Like, this would be great probably if you divided it into episodes, but in one long novel, it's too much. You need to take some of it out and condense a little bit, especially since I feel like you just know where the story is going. So when you know where the story is going, you don't want to take a lot of time to get there, or at least that's me. And that's definitely me being grumpy. The reason I wanted to read this is that on the Montana Book Company's reading challenge, there is a prompt to read a book by an LGBTQ author. I read a lot of LGBTQ books all the time, so I wanted to make it a little more challenging for myself and read a book by an author from one of the lesser represented letters from the acronym, and Alice Oseman identifies as asexual. But I didn't just want to read an Alice Oseman book. This one is about a character who is asexual, finding out that she is asexual. And I thought that was interesting as well, because it's not someone who is already out and defined as asexual. It's someone who has grown up in a culture that really prizes romance and romantic stories. Like every Disney movie ever made, she loves fanfic about I don't like the fanfic, like where you take characters and make them lovers from something. She loves that stuff. So she's kind of waiting for her own romance, but she's never felt attracted to anyone. She has never kissed anyone. She's never wanted to kiss anyone, but she feels like she should want those things. And because she doesn't want to be alone, she wants to have this sort of romance in her life. She feels like she needs to find a way to make it work for herself. So she goes to college and she meets a roommate. Two of her best friends go to the same college. And basically it's just about her figuring out that she is asexual, especially since it's not part of the LGBTQIA acronym. I mean, people even leave it out all the time. Even me, I'm guilty of this. You just say LGBTQ and LGBTQIA. Like, it's one of the ones that gets left out. So she starts to learn about it. And that's one of the things that to me took a little, like, people keep putting evidence or like things about asexuality in front of her, and she just doesn't make the connection for a little too long to me. That's how life works. But in a novel, I feel like I wanted her to come to the realization much more quickly so she could start figuring herself out and dealing with it. And I didn't want to spend so much time with her trying to go on dates, kissing her friends and things like that, especially when you know where it's going. Maybe this is me being grumpy again. And then, you know, in traditional romantic comedies or books like this, it's not a romantic comedy because, again, she is asexual and aromantic. And she doesn't want those things, ultimately, is what she finds. But she can be happy because she won't be lonely. She'll have her friendships. That's kind of the journey that she's on. But in all of these books, there needs to be some kind of a conflict that breaks everybody up and then they come back together. So the conflict that happens is in like the middle of the book. And it takes way too long, in my opinion, to get everybody back together. it's just way too complicated and you know it's going to happen. It just keeps making you wait and making you wait. And I confess, I started getting really irritated, and I don't like to speed up audiobooks too much. Like 1.2 is usually where I live with an audiobook. I went up to 1.8 on this audiobook at a certain point because I was like, I really just want to get to the ending at this point. I know what's going to happen. I just want to get there. And then what you think is the ending happens and another scene starts. And I'm like, oh my God, it took forever to get here. Why is this happening? And then I look and there are like over 30 minutes left at 1.8 speed. And I admit I threw like a mini tantrum to myself this morning. Like, why? Should I just stop? What is left to happen? Well, it turns out there's a short story at the end of the audiobook. I didn't listen to the short story, obviously. But so there was only maybe 5 or 10 minutes left in the actual book. So I felt a little silly for the tantrum. But anyway, I think this is a good book. I do think it's too long, but I think it really suffered from me reading it at this point in time when I'm like really grumpy and overtired and all of that. So I wouldn't judge this book based on my reaction to it. I think if I had read it even a week ago, or like around the time that I was doing The Secret Life of Albert Entwistle, I probably would have liked it better. I was just really impatient for it to get to the point. So I think your mileage may vary compared to mine, but I kept getting really annoyed. So that's what I finished this week. I don't have anything else started right now. So I have vague plans for July. Let's kind of talk a little bit. One thing is July is Disability Awareness Month, or Visibility Month. So I want to do something, if I can, that will do that. So I pulled 2 options. The first one I thought of might not actually fit. It's Elena Knows by Claudia Pinheiro. I do definitely want to read this, but I don't know if this is disability so much as it's chronic illness. I need to look into it a little more before I decide, but I definitely want to read this book this year. So I'm much more likely to do either True Biz by Sarah Novick, which is about deaf students at a high school, or there's an audio on Scribd by Niall DeMarco called Deaf Utopia about his life being a deaf person. So I'll probably try to do one of those this month as well. I'm also really thinking about trying to read Persuasion by Jane Austen before the Dakota Johnson movie debuts on, I think, Netflix. But I don't have a copy of it. There is an audio, but I feel like if I'm going to end up doing a movie to book comparison, I'm going to want to have read the book. So, but also I'm tired, so I don't want to think about that level of work. So maybe I'll just chill, listen to the audio, and be disappointed in the movie. And I feel like if I get those off of my plate, I have decided what my next Pulitzer Prize project book is going to be. Stay tuned. I had talked about my possibilities, and I was actually thinking that I would let it go to a vote so you guys could decide between the 2 or 3 contenders that I had. But I know which one I want to do, so I'm going to do it. And I promise I will let you help vote on one in the future. And if I can get some of those off of my plate, there is another eGalley coming out next month that I would like to fit in as well. So like that's enough right there. But if I can get some of those things picked off of my plate, I really want to get back to the Love Songs of W.E.B. Du Bois by Honore Fanon Jeffers, because I've been loving this book. I'm halfway through. I had to put it down to wait for the paperback. And then I didn't want to pick it up in Pride Month because I was focusing on LGBTQ books. So, and I just did it again, LGBTQIA books. So I really want to get back to that. So that's my loose plan for July. I'm going to go have some more coffee so I can calm myself down and stop being grumpy. And maybe I'll try to get some sleep this weekend. We'll see how that goes. But I'd love to hear what your week has been like, what you've been reading, watching, loving, hating, all of that. Put it in the comments down below. As always, I really appreciate your time, especially when I'm grumpy. Hopefully fun grumpy. As always, I will be back. Until next time, happy reading.